pleasure to be here today. Very fortunate. It's my fourth year speaking at the Global Blockchain Summit. Many friends here in Shanghai. I want to thank our hosts, Dr. Zhao, Duyu, and the team at Wingsheng. And I'm just here to introduce the real technical genius, but I want to say first that Paul Snow invented something with Factum that people are only starting to appreciate today. And that is a data-first and identity-first approach to blockchain and the need for huge scalability. And so I'm excited to hear Paul talk today about how the technology that Factum has built is now powering applications all over the world, here in China, Europe, the United States, and serving real enterprise. So I'll let him take it away, but it's great to be here another year in Shanghai, and I thank all of our partners that are here today to support our growth, and excited to see this revolution reach the mainstream. So thank you. 谢谢.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon. How are you all doing? Sorry, I'm from the South in the United States, and that's just kind of how we talk to each other. I'm here to talk to you about Factum. One of the things that I have done with, or at least what I observed looking at the blockchain and all the potential uses of the blockchain, is consider the whole problem as a data problem. So those of you that have can remember my talk from last year, I emphasized data. This time I'm kind of going over the whole architecture of a data approach to the blockchain and try to give you a feeling as to why data is the solution for a lot of problems in applying blockchain to real world applications. So the first thing is you have to have a digital identity. That'll become more clear as I go through this. A digital identity is something relatively simple. It is a identifiable set of data in the blockchain, okay? And it has to have a set of public keys that it can use, that other entities can use to verify things that are signed by the digital identity. And that is, it has to be able to give attestations. It has to provide attributes to other digital identities. It has to be able to receive attributes from those other digital identities. And that's kind of about it. That's all a digital identity really is, at least at the first step. Traditional identities we all know about. Your bank knows who you are because it has certain numbers of yours that they got from the government. It has your name, it has your address, it has your phone number. It has basically some personal identifying information. Now, every other organization that needs to know who you are also needs that information. And as we start working towards compliance to ideas like GDPR, even more organizations will want to know that information, and your personal identity begins to fly away from you. Also, we want to create digital identities. Boy, I'm tripping. We want to create digital identities that integrate the time component. And this is one of the things that the blockchain can do. The blockchain can keep what time you actually signed an attribute to something else. And it can keep what time an attribute from some other identity was assigned to you. In other words, it's the key that lets you look at the historical context of your identity. And history matters. Because if I have signed something, let's say I've signed a contract last year, I need to be able to validate that signature last year, that your identity signed it. This presupposes that I can prove that your identity existed last year, and that the attestations that have been assigned to you come from identities that have their own history, and I can review that history. And this comes to the security question, okay? How do I switch out the personal the keys that I'm using to sign attestations? How do I switch them out? If somebody steals my private key somehow, in the current world, if your certification has been hacked on your website and somebody can sign web pages, there's no way for anyone to validate that web pages signed with the key now really came from you. So you want to change that key, and now suddenly you can't validate your past signatures. But on the blockchain, we have the time component, which means that if I have the little fishy there, this little, well, I can't point at it, but the little fishy over here, that's my private key, my public key that I'm using in my applications to sign attestations. If it goes bad, I need to have a bigger key that can replace and invalidate the compromised key. Or if I want to swap my keys out, I need to have a higher priority key to replace keys that may have been compromised, or I just want to swap them out in the first place. And then, of course, we need, if we're going to create digital identities on the blockchain, we need to have a big fish that I can go to reset myself. And so, in Factum, we've created chains for those, your identities that belong to you, and we have this hierarchical set of authorities, effectively, keys that you're keeping that are higher priority than the keys that you're using, and perhaps even an indication that your identity is being managed by some identity authority that you trust to be able to reset your password should you lose your keys. And all of this can be done pretty simply with a chain in the blockchain and the right attestations in that chain. And so identities are really, really critical. So you have a smart contract. You have a smart contract between certain parties. Who are they? Who is responsible? If it's manipulating real-world artifacts, real-world resources, who's real estate? Who's supposed to pay the bill? Who's going to validate that the service was rendered? Who's going to determine the answer when a conflict arises and two parties have to be going in front of mediation to resolve their conflict? You need digital identities. You need to be able to know who the parties are in the contracts to simply pass the kinds of rigorous requirements that we have in the real world today. And starting with the ability to manage digital identities is going to be the key to having smart contracts that actually work in the real world. The other thing about this is that we want to move away from systems of record, the old style, a couple or three people are in charge, there's a few tapes. If you want to know what your status is with your bank is going to tell you what your status is. And if you want to know your status with the government, then the government's going to tell you. And so this is kind of a systems of record. There is a computer out there that when you ask in that database what your account balance is, just to pick an example, then that system, when it comes back and tells you you have X amount of money in your account, we have to take that as true, because that's the system of record. But we're moving into a world where everyone is an authority about something. It's a digital identity for everyone, and actually I'm understating this. It's a digital identity for all the Internet of Things devices out there. It's a digital identity for all the organizations you belong to. It's a digital identity for your governments and agencies in the government, for individuals working in the government, and all of us, and everything else. I mean, it'll get down to a digital identity for every piece of software you install in your computer. So the whole idea of a system of authority is that if those entities have digital identities, they can sign attestations for those events in the real world that they are the authority for. When I have a business process that starts in the US, involves shipping products in a boat to Ireland, that involves some manufacturer that gets shipped to China. There's so many different parties, so many different jurisdictions, so many organizational lines that have been crossed. I have to have digital identities, and I have to have systems, the ability to sign off on each step to that digital process in order to prove everything is right. And today we have to figure out a system of record, but a system of record rules everything. So nobody wants to give up the control and the responsibility of what's right and what's wrong to somebody else when their entire business depends on the question. So it's very hard to build these systems that track business processes across many different parties. With the blockchain, I can create digital identities, and I can create a system of record that you have a sign-off by the parties that are involved and responsible at each step of the way. And so it is an amazingly effective way to conduct business. And then the question is scale. Now, with Factom and with its completely data-oriented approach, where we're writing data into the blockchain, and we're segregating that away from all of the token transactions that provide incentives to create a distributed autonomous system, then we have a mechanism to shard the network by the data itself. And it's just like the concept of BitTorrent. It's just like the concept of your video screen, where you can employ many processors to calculate little parts of the screen, because all it is data. It's so many pixels on the screen. We're taking the same approach to the blockchain. And Factom went completely and totally distributed and autonomous in May of this year, and we have 21 different parties that are running parts of the network, and it's moving to 65 over time. And all of this depends on digital identities for all the actors and for all the processes involved. So this is real world implementations that are working today and can be easily deployed in so many different applications, from supply side problems to loan origination to dealing with any kind of business process that crosses different organizations. We have been doing a bunch of work with the Gates Foundation and doing medical records in Africa, and we've been doing a lot of work with the Department of Homeland Security, creating blockchain solutions for sensors on the border to create basically audit trails to secure evidence when evidence is needed. And we have a bunch of investors. And this is Factom. Factom is an approach that looks at the data and models the data for real-world business problems. It concentrates on identity, and it concentrates on building systems of authority that allow business processes running on Factom to be secure and to be scalable and to be deployed in the world today. Thank you very much.